All right, let me get started here. All right, I'm going to kick things off, but again, I encourage you to say hello and welcome in the chat. My name is Danielle Barnes. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the co-founders and organizers of Austin Design Week. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you here today. This may be the first event that you're joining. It may be the first of the day, or maybe you've been spending the week with us. So we hope that you've been enjoying your Austin Design Week experience, and we'd love to hear from you. So you'll see here at the bottom of the slide that there are some ways that you can stay in touch on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. We encourage you to hashtag ADW20, hashtag embrace, and fill in what that blank is for you. I also want to encourage you to check out the ADW schedule. We have lots going on this week. It's all free for the community. It's mostly virtual. And you can go to that link and see everything that's going on. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to join our Slack channel. This is a great way to stay in touch throughout the week. We share announcements here. You can go in and introduce yourself. You can also get some takeaways from the event. And so we encourage you, even after this panel, to share what you learned and continue the conversation there. And then finally, I want to say a big thank you to everyone. Thank you to all of you for being here and participating in Austin Design Week. Thank you to our generous hosts who are putting on these events, our volunteers who are helping make this happen, and then also our partners and sponsors who help keep this event completely free to the community. So we're highlighting some of them here. And without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome you to this event. So I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Brittany Williams, to kick things off.
Everyone, welcome to Austin Design Week. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you attendees who are watching. I'll just introduce myself a bit. Y'all know me, but my name is Brittany. I am 1/5 of Brown Collective Studio. It is an interior design based studio based here in Austin, Texas and San Miguel, Mexico. There's 5 of us, 2 of them are here, and yeah, our mission is to really put into practice what inclusive design means, and who's creating for spaces, who's designing for spaces, and considering the people that inhabit those spaces. So just wanted to thank everyone for being here. Today we're going to talk with you guys about, I know that this year has been really heavy for, I guess I'll just speak for myself, but definitely for myself, and I think we've seen a lot of creativity come out of this year and benefits, and I just wanted to have a conversation with y'all respectively and together about kind of what it is that we've seen, what are our reactions, how are we putting that into practice, and yeah, just talk about that through the lens of design as well, because I mean, Moyo, photographer, architect, lawyer, like those are design in a sense. It's not just product design that shapes the world we live in. So I wanted to have a conversation with y'all, and I'm gonna let y'all introduce yourselves. We can go either way, whoever wants to talk first.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. My name is Denise Hernandez. I'm a lawyer and social entrepreneur here in Austin, the founder of Chingona Fest Texas, which is a Latinx empowerment festival, and then the co-founder with my wife of Hustle for the Cause, which is a socially responsible business consultation company, helping BIPOC entrepreneurs create space and be change makers. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm Aisha Erkin. Brittany already knows me. I'm an architectural designer at Lake Plato Architects in the Austin office, and I'm also co-founder of Brown Girls Food Club, which is a community organization that me and some friends founded, where we wanted to create a space for BIPOC women to connect over food and to support minority-owned restaurants. But I also consider myself a multifaceted designer, since I like to dabble in almost anything design related. Fashion, food, whatever. I don't like being confined to one box, because my entire life I've been told to be one thing, and so past few years I was like, no, I'm just gonna do everything. So yeah, excited to be here as well.
Yay.
Thank you, Brittany.
Y'all's like introductions are so long and eloquent. I'm just like, hi, my name is Moyo, and I'm a multimedia artist and storyteller.
Yeah,
Here I am.
That says a lot.
So,
yeah, perfect. So thank you guys for being here again. We're really excited to host you. I'm going to start with you, Aisha, just because I really find your the way you've woven all of your creative backgrounds like together and told that story. Y'all, you have to check out her Instagram. It's awesome. I'll let you tell the handle, but you
Thank you.
started your Unsung Architect series on Instagram, and it's really, I'll let you explain it, but it's been so great for me to just like watch the architects that you are highlighting and learning so much, because oftentimes I'm like Googling after
Yes.
like, they're where, what did they do, how did I not know about this? And I just think it's great that you're like kind of giving people the roses, even though a lot of them I think have passed away, but
Yeah.
giving those brown designers often in a field, we've talked about this, where they do not get the same recognition. So why
Yeah.
did you start doing that? Like, what is your mission in that? How are you selecting the people?
So the reason I started was, like you said, that there wasn't a lot of representation in the design field. I noticed my own design lens was very limited. A lot of times when I was looking at precedents or designers that I look up to, and some of my favorite architects, I was like sitting there thinking, wait, all my favorite architects are old white men.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. I'm not an old white man, so like, why is there that disconnect?
Yeah.
And so I started doing my own research, because academia, even though I love academia, there is that disconnect. It's expensive to go back to school.
Yeah.
It is a sacrifice that you have to make. Like, you can't work and do school at the same time. So I was like, I'm just gonna self-educate.
Yeah.
So I started reading up on whatever BIPOC architects in regions that I was interested in. I started thinking about regions that related to me specifically, like Pakistan, the Middle East, certain parts of Europe, Central Asia,
Yeah.
and just learning about that. And then basically, like on social media, I started sharing it because the pandemic happened and we couldn't travel. So that the way I like break down my Instagram is the three main, not pillars, but things that I do regularly in my life, which is design, food, and architecture. Wait, no, design, food, and style. I was like, wait, I forgot for a second. But the design part usually is architecture that I'm seeing, or when I'm traveling or walking around, doing normal life things, and I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I have all this research. It's beneficial to me, so I'm sure it's going to benefit other people, because the conversations I've had with other BIPOC designers in the field, and not just architecture, just the design field in general, have said that there isn't that representation and they don't have that alignment.
Yeah.
And so I love sharing information. I love being part of a community. So I decided, let me just put it online, because everything's online nowadays. And one thing that through that, the research, I realized, like, everyone talks about how representation is so important,
Yeah.
but you don't understand how important it is until you actually feel represented.
Yeah. Until you see yourself.
Yeah, until you see yourself and you're like, oh, whoa, I had never heard about this architect. She's badass. Like,
Yes.
Yasmin Lari is one.
Yeah.
She's from Pakistan, and she was kind of like a starchitect level, but then she realized, like, after the earthquake that happened in 2005, that humanitarian architecture is so necessary, and that architecture shouldn't always be something with a capital A.
Yeah.
And she started doing work for the villages in Pakistan, and not just architecture. She designed this stove, which is called a chula, that is non-combustible, because a lot of times the stove tops in the villages that the women would use would explode and kill them. So she looked beyond just the lens of like the house that you're living in. She looked at what you're actually using, your
Yeah.
day-to-day activities, and trying to make someone's life better. It's not alive, but there are a lot of architects like that, that it's not that academia doesn't want you to learn about them, it's just they're not recognizable. They're not the classics like Le Corbusier and
Yeah.
Nice and all of
Yeah.
that. So that's how I started it.
Yeah. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Well, it's really interesting that you say how important representation is, and I think this goes to your point, Brittany, about design being outside of just interior design or
Yeah.
structural design, but human and community design. When we create and uplift our BIPOC communities, we allow the design of people being seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that then cultivates leadership and growth within our own communities. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because we can see design for more than just what it's typically discussed as. And that's a beautiful story of you sharing how that's impacted you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, 100%. And I don't know, like, I mean, I'm sure we could look back in history and kind of figure out when white men's voices were like the central anchor for when we think of design in a classic sense. But I've like so appreciated that. I mean it, like,
Thank
just
you.
that series, because
Yeah.
it's just like you said, like, you don't realize like, what does it mean to be represented? And especially in the industries that we occupy, it's very rare that you'll see an architect of color or an interior designer of color highlighted in those classic senses, right? Like people who don't even know about interior design know of like an Eames chair.
Exactly.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
there's a reason for that, you
Yeah.
know, and so I've really enjoyed that.
Thanks. And I think, I mean, going off of that, the reason I feel like we're not as represented in the field is because the struggles to get to a position where you are recognizable.
Highlighted like that, yes.
It's
it
like,
is.
it's especially in the
Why?
past.
Yeah.
Like I just recently learned about Paul Revere Williams, who was the first Black African American like architect licensed in the U.S. And so that's the thing, you don't know his
Did you
name.
work in California?
Yes.
Yes.
He
I
shaped
listened
LA.
to an NPR podcast.
Exactly.
Yes,
He shaped
Yeah,
LA. He
yeah.
did he's responsible for basically the whole entire interiors of the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is iconic. It's like
Yeah.
everywhere on Instagram.
yeah.
But nobody knows who did
His
it.
name, right.
However, Falling Water, immediately you're like, Frank
Oh,
Lloyd
yeah.
I
Wright.
know,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, but it's
I've
like
seen
the
that.
same level of
Like
design.
impact on
Yeah.
culture, yeah, 100%.
And it's insane because I learned that he had to draw upside down with his clients because sometimes his white clients didn't want to sit next to him. So he developed that
Had to, like,
skill.
flip it,
Yeah.
as-
It's just these stories, and you
Sickening.
never think that. I mean, you do think now. You're like, okay, this is why there's that divide. This is why there's only 2% of architects are black, and only like
Yeah.
certain percentage are women. Because even to this day, like going on site, I have so
and
many
then don't wanna-
stories.
Yeah, ask you what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, one thing that I often wonder about your work, we're friends, so we've talked, but like we've never talked about how this year in particular has impacted your work, especially in the visual sense. I feel like in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a lot, like media was just black, blackity, black, black. Everything I felt like was black bodies,
Yep.
black killings,
Yep.
black activists.
Yep.
And like the light needed to be shown, but also it was just a lot of input of
Yep.
negative and positive images. I wonder, like, as someone who uses their eye to communicate their feelings, like, what is this year like conjured in you? What is like,
Yeah.
how are you feeling? I guess I'm just.
How am I feeling?
Yeah, I know that one's heavier.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think there's we've continued to exist through a lot of trauma, right? And like, I didn't watch the video. I was like, I'm not gonna watch this.
Yeah,
Like another
I
one, like I'm not gonna
watched
watch
it,
the video,
yeah.
right? And so, because we all knew what happened, right?
Right.
And there's been so many countless moments where, like in the past with other people, right, where it's happened, and you just kind of like, you go through your day and you're still supposed to show up to your 9 to 5 or your project or whatever it is. But you know, everyone in the country and the world, quite frankly, were like at a standstill. Like, you didn't have brunch to go to, you didn't have that
Right, right,
vacation.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't, you didn't have any other distraction,
Distraction.
right? So we were all forced to like literally watch men like get murdered, right?
Yeah.
So that was strange. But for me, I think it's about like, okay, in your body of work, what do you then kind of counter? How do you counter that
Mhm.
narrative
Mhm.
in some sense of how do you show hope and perseverance and joy?
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of friends lately who are like, yeah, I'm not gonna show black pain or black trauma. I'm gonna like be on the opposite side of the
different narrative.
spectrum,
Right.
because that's also reality.
Yes,
Otherwise,
yeah.
we get stuck into like, oh, black people just being killed all around the world, and that's it. No, there's moments, there's lots of
Yeah.
beauty, there's a lot of grace, there's a lot of things to celebrate. So that's how a lot of my energy has been really focused in preserving those moments and celebrating those moments, and just being deeper in my why. Of why I do what I do, right? We've all had our plans have changed, but it's allowed me to dream bigger intentionally for the community, the projects I'm doing and who I'm doing it with. And this is a period of time where, you know, it's also kind of easy to filter out who's really down to do the work and who's not ready to do the work. Because
very
it's like, yo,
easy.
it's been 8-9 months
Right.
and you're still talking about that. Like,
Right. Like,
this is
what are
what
the
you-
actions?
yeah,
that
what are
you've
the
done
actions,
today?
right? So,
Totally.
and you know, and it's like when the noise, when everything dies down, like you can really tell who's done the work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I've been, both on like the physical projects, the visual projects, whatever it is. It's just being very intentional about that.
That's very
Yeah.
true. One other question I have, I guess this is like, could be tied to both of you. You've also seen on the other end of detrimental images and Black women's voices being at least heard, is just kind of this idea of like corporations throwing money at the Black cause. And to artists, especially, yeah.
With my side with
And like,
Okay.
one thing my partners are is reminding me is he's like, you know, just be cautious of who gives you money and who wants to highlight you because it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, with you, with your legal background, and I mean, you help BIPOC creatives start a business and like make money and be socially impactful. And then I'm sure corporations have come to you. I mean, I know they have, asking for like, we'll give you some money if you you know, if you do X, Y, and Z. Like, what are some of the downfalls or fears that, like, downfalls from your end that creatives are like overlooking if it comes to a legal standpoint of those connections? And then is there anything like, you're like, artists do not do this shit, or like be mindful of X? Like, what are some of those?
Yeah, so the thing that comes to mind immediately is that after George Floyd, we saw corporations coming out with racial justice statements.
Right.
And that is like the bare minimum, honestly, right? And to me, the work really comes not just with the racial justice statement, and not just with hiring BIPOC creatives, but being intentional, not just this year, but continuing on that work, but also supporting paid sick leave, supporting pay equity, supporting universal health care as a corporation, because we know corporations have huge influence when it comes to our government and our policies. So on top of that racial justice statement and on top of hiring BIPOC creatives, which is bare minimum, doing more to push policies that really impact our marginalized communities after this year has passed. And not just selecting a handful of BIPOC creatives to work on stuff to say that you are, you know, about social impact, because then that turns into tokenism, right? And you're not affecting real creative change, a real social change in the community by just sticking to a handful of folks, right? It requires that extra thought of pushing forward policies within your organization, like paid sick leave and equal pay, but then supporting platforms and programs that uplift creatives of color. And what I think about this is investing in BIPOC-led organizations. And I don't mean investing by saying, hey, I'm gonna give you this money and then I'm gonna take ownership in your money. I mean investing by creating grant programs that allow BIPOC creatives to maintain ownership of their products and their work, exactly. And so as a lawyer, you know, the thing that I try to tell all my clients and people that I work with is, when you're taking money, look into that organization, look into that corporation. What type of policies are they pushing forward? And are they really committed to this? Or is it just lip service, right? Or they just have that one statement out and that's all they're doing? And be intentional with who you align with. And use your position to force that change. Because you are a high, necessary service and designer and creative for that business. You have power in negotiating for them to impact change. Hey, you want me to work with you? Well, I want to see that you're pushing forward this or that you're going to work towards it. Like, tell me more about what you're doing in your corporation to create real racial justice. And I think that sometimes we forget that we have that power to influence that change.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, we're checking for the receipts and we're checking for the itemized receipts. You know what I mean?
Don't give me the
Not
summary.
like
we want it all, right? And I think it's like, it's across the board of like the ecosystem of the company. It's like, who else works here, right? And who else do you work with? And then once you're in the room advocating for other, BIPOC creatives, right? For them to be hired on as crew or whatever it is. Definitely had, there's an article about like the kind of like the aftertaste of like a lot of like, creatives were hit up for work and then it's like, all right, cool. And then they're like, we did that and bye. And they're like, what? So there was definitely a couple of that. And some I said yes to and a lot more I said no to, just because I was like, this doesn't make sense. This is just a checklist of things. And what people need to realize that for communities of color, like one of the most important things for us is relationship. That's how we define wealth.
Yes.
Yes.
Is relationships, our proximity to each other.
Yeah.
This is
Is
wealth for
wealth,
me.
yeah,
Like
yes.
not a
Sure,
dollar
yeah.
amount. It's about the fact that we can be here.
Agreed.
And so that's how I'm also, like, to your point of evaluating, like, who do I work with and who do I say yes to, is like, who's really actually investing in a foundation that allows us to really build versus just kind of like checking one things off, like standing up a false building and then just like, waiting for it to fall over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But if you're creative and you find yourself in a room, like, advocate, make your ask. Which is like, we typically don't even know how to do that. We don't
Yes.
learn how to do that, but like, just do it. Don't be afraid. Just do it and realize that they need you just as much as you need them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt, and you see what happens from there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Even, I think also during this time, people have become so terrified to say the wrong thing or not say the right thing. I'm not saying, some stuff just like don't even think about saying, but when it comes to you advocating for yourself, it can be a fearful, like, did I say that right? Was I kind enough? Should I have been more assertive? No, I should not. And just like, if you have their ear, you need to say something, even if it's not perfect. Because once you have their ear, then you can like engage in a conversation, which you'll figure it out. You know.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree. I think that's something that I've been learning the older I get, is the mentality that I grew up with is grateful to be here. And so you take what you get and you just don't ask questions.
Complain.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I'm in this position, I'm here, like this isn't a space made for me.
But I made it.
Yeah, and so you're just like, no, this is, until you take a step back and you're like, wait, there's this divide, there's a difference. Why is it like this? Like, you need to question that.
For sure.
And it's a struggle because like that goes back to like the cultures that we come from. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's like the low context and high context culture, and we come
Absolutely.
from a high context culture. So for us, we don't want to, what is it called? Not rattle the boat, shake the boat.
Shake it.
Rattle the boat.
That's your shame.
Whatever the
Move
boat.
it.
Move the boat. You want it to sail
Yeah.
smoothly, and so you're afraid to cause that disruption.
Yeah,
So-
we're like taught culturally not to take risks.
Yes.
And I think that becomes a detriment in this society we live in, where we play safe, even when we're
Yes.
succeeding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even when we still have a good job and good car and all these
Yep.
things, right? Versus it's like, we definitely need to be more involved in, because everything is designed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Politics, that designs our roads, our houses, right? Art,
Everything. Yeah.
photography, anything. So it's like we need to not be so afraid, and it's all about representation, because once you then see yourself doing it, then you're like, oh, okay, like you have language that gives you access
Yeah.
to move around in
Yeah.
any space that you go into. So
For sure.
Yeah, we shouldn't be scared to have uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
And I think so often it's ingrained in us to not make things uncomfortable, right? Like don't sit in that uncomfortableness, but that's where the change happens, is when we're uncomfortable and we're calling people out. It's necessary, because that's how we move forward,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to have those
get
uncomfortable discussions.
in some good trouble.
Yeah, get in some good
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's I think it was on Monday, I was participating in a talk with Ijoma Olu, who wrote So You Want to Talk About Race. She was speaking at the University of Arkansas, and she was... Oh, you I don't know, I should've
Surprise!
and she was just saying, like, white supremacy isn't going to end until white people are sick of talking about race. And I was like, oh, damn, that's like, you have to make people uncomfortable and so annoyed that they're called to action, you know, in that
Yeah.
sense. And we're definitely not there yet. I think we've like, this, nowhere near it, you know.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see, what else did we, there's something else. Oh,
What?
I wanted to talk more about like your background and I guess everyone here can kind of speak to that, but specifically you and what you've been doing with Unsung Architects. I think like you are it's kind of funny, but I see yourself as one of those people that you're highlighting in terms of like, yeah, I mean, in terms of like
Guessing me
the
up.
space. No, really,
Let it
in
be.
terms of the
Take it
space. Yeah, exactly. Enjoy it. In terms of the space that you occupy and with your background, like you're a rarity. And I know you know that, and I don't say that condescendingly, but
No,
like,
thank you. Yeah.
I just would love to know like how you've dealt with that growing up, especially in the industry that you're in, because
Yeah.
we've talked about the struggles.
It is a struggle, and the thing like growing up for me was I tried to not embrace any of that part of my identity because it was just easier to assimilate consistently and just ignore the parts that made me who I am. So I guess like from background, my family is very, very mixed. We are like 4 generations of immigrants, including myself, and we come from, actually it's interesting because like I've been able to break it down, and we're Turkic, South Asian, and then we have some European heritage. So my mother is Gulf Arab and Bulgarian and Turkish, and she was born in Venezuela, lived there, in India, Saudi Arabia, spent most of her life in Germany, and then married my dad, who is half Uyghur and Uzbek, and has some Afghani as well. Uyghurs are the ones who are currently going through a genocide, actually, in China. So yeah, there's a lot of identities to envelop.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, and then of course, I was born and
Yeah,
raised in
like,
Pakistan. I was like, I was like, I'm
like,
missing
dude,
one.
Small-
I've heard
small
this
detail.
before. Yeah.
I always have to like read them. Like, okay, what are the steps? So in my mind, I have like a map where I'm like my
Yeah.
mother's side, my father's
Yeah.
side, and then where we lived versus
there's
where
you.
we're from.
Yeah.
Because it's like where you live versus where you're from is a difficult question because like the places that I've lived aren't necessarily my heritage, but they are part of who I am.
Yeah.
So like Pakistan, I'm born and raised there, lived there for about 10 years, lived in Saudi Arabia, lived in Germany for a bit, and then moved to the US when I was 14. So I've spent actually 14 years living in Eastern countries and 14 years living in Western countries. And so I have that East and West, East meets West, like
yeah.
literally
Yeah.
crossroads.
Yeah.
Which benefits me just like in general, like seeing the world from a different perspective. But it was a struggle because whenever, like I moved to America when I was 14 to Tyler, Texas, which is,
Wow.
everyone's always like,
Feel.
you're not okay with that, yeah.
East Texas.
Yeah,
okay.
East Texas,
Yeah.
East Texas. So not nowhere cool like New York where you can meet people and like, you know, find that group. Even though like I made incredible friends from Tyler, but it was a struggle in the beginning because all I tried to do was assimilate.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to stand out, it was easier for me to just like blend in with the crowd. Especially since I am like a lighter skinned BIPOC person, if you don't know my features like my nose and my eye shape and everything, I can blend in mostly anyway, which is like kind of scary. But but because of that, I was like, I'm just gonna dress like everyone there. I'm gonna stop wearing my cultural clothes. I'm gonna wear like North Face jackets and leggings and just like call it a day. And if anyone asks where I'm from, I'm gonna say Texas, even though clearly I wasn't.
Yeah.
So it took me until I went to college where I was detached from my family to understand how important my heritage and my identity was because I was alone, like 18 years old. The only thing I had honestly to cling on to was like my religion because there was a mosque, there's a physical place that I could go to, but everything else, like since I went to school in Fayetteville, Arkansas, it's not super diverse either.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not picking diverse places.
Yeah, I know.
But like to go to New York or anywhere like that is expensive. And like as an immigrant, you just can't be like, I'm gonna go to design school in New York. Like
Yeah.
my parents they were just like, are you crazy?
Right.
And it's understandably so. It's a big bullet.
Costly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, like doing something that's a creative field is out of the norm.
Right.
In the immigrant
Exactly.
community. Yeah.
Because it's more
You-
risky. Like I'm sure you feel
You know,
this.
yeah.
And even though architecture was the one that was acceptable because it has like science and
And math.
Right.
and math and so
Oh, and there's like
It's a
upper,
thing.
Yeah,
there are
exactly.
more degrees
Yeah,
you can
there's
get
more
than
degrees
that.
you can get,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Good.
it was digestible. But
Yeah.
I initially didn't want to do that. I wanted to do culinary school or art school, but I like settled on architecture. But and it's not settled, like I'm glad I did it. But
I know what you mean.
it was hard. So yeah, like college is where I was like, no, I need to really understand who I am as a person, where I'm from,
Yeah.
and that's just gonna be something that I need to accept because I'm never gonna find that space where I will be 100% myself, you know, like I have to create that space, like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's like a little bit of the struggle. Yeah.
And I like that notion of you have to create it, right? Of just like looking at your current environment where we're at. It's like choosing to be the one to seek that out and take the risk.
Yeah.
And I think it's things change as the generations go further in. Like our children are going to be like so brilliant because they'll have so many examples
Yeah.
of like what's possible,
Yeah.
right? And that just kind of comes with that, generational effect of being an immigrant, where it's like at first it's like let's just be established and be
Yes.
safe, and then like we're the ones who are like, oh, okay, we don't want to do that. I think because we've also seen the spectrum, right? We see like other little, white boys and girls like running around doing something. And we're like, I can do that too,
Yeah.
right? And so, and I understand where our parents come from because it's all just love.
100%.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I've had to like you have to accept that as you get older. That like
Yeah.
it's just straight up love. They just want to make sure that you're good and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And their context is very limited.
Yes.
They're adjusting too, and they have their jobs that they're trying to like accumulate.
Maneuver.
It's
and
tough,
maneuver
yeah.
and
I
figure
feel
out
so
and
much for
career
them.
paths and home and all that stuff. So I've been really thankful of just like my parents' journey and their sacrifice and love. And I think the relationship has changed dramatically, right?
Yeah.
And as the years goes on, where they're like, oh, he actually knows what he's doing. Like, he's
Now
like,
they trust me.
he knows what he's doing. He's like, and so, and then, sometimes they're like surprised at the projects, and they're like, where are you going? For what? It's like, yeah. He's like, they're paying for it. It's like, yeah. Like, I get paid to do that. Right? And because they can't really fathom it as
Yeah.
people who have 9-to-5s, more
Yeah.
traditional type of jobs. But I love making them believers. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a great goal
Great
for me to
feeling,
like
yeah.
keep them to keep believing, because I'm like, there's still so much life in you. For my parents, I was like, and I want you to keep dreaming. Like, don't lose that.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So, so that's kind of like my background too. Similar, UT. I grew up here in Austin, UT, all that stuff. And then there's that journey of like, who am I,
Yeah.
and what do I want to be? And honestly, it was probably there was a stark difference when I like turned 25 and like I was like, why am I in my own way? It's like it's not even my parents anymore. It's not even anyone else. It's actually me. And I felt like I was restricted in my thinking. So jumped on a plane, started traveling the world.
Nice.
South Africa, saw design, in a very black context, mixed with the modern, in a modern metropolitan city, and that was incredible because I don't have that here.
No.
Right?
Nope.
I don't have 50,000 square foot like art museums that are
Yeah.
with big black work
Black
just
work,
like put
yeah.
up there.
Yeah.
So I started dreaming a lot bigger, and I think I know it's the reason why I'm here right now. It's because of those moments.
Yeah.
I definitely want to encourage just like creatives, artists, designers to stay forever curious, and to do that introspective work of saying like, what's your why? Because your how will change. The how in which we do stuff has changed in the last 8 months or so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
But
definitely.
when your why becomes a stronger North Star, and so I think it's like once you know that, then you can always adapt to any environment you're in.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting hearing everyone's perspective of success, because I feel like when we were growing up that success was kind of hand in hand with assimilation. Like you needed to assimilate in order
Yes.
to be successful. You had to dress a certain way, speak a certain way, present yourself a certain way, go down a certain path that everyone expects you to, right? And I think, as a young Latina living in Texas, I definitely had my parents, my dad was an immigrant, my mom was from the Valley and has been here in the United States for years. And then I'm starting to realize and now identifying with the fact that I am native to this land, right? And that's not something that is discussed in school, right? When they're talking about Native Americans, hardly do you get that connection. Well, at least when I was growing up, that connection between being Native American and being Latino, or having that connection. But through my own research, learning that my family has been a part of this land for centuries.
Yeah.
Wow.
And feeling very sad that I didn't know that early on in my life, But with that said, I feel like my parents went through this forced assimilation, right? They needed to go down a certain path to be successful. I mean, my mom was literally hit with a ruler anytime she spoke Spanish. She was definitely punished for her identity.
Yeah.
And so for us, my sister and I, when we were growing up, was, Spanish was not talked often, though my mom and my dad are fluent. I'm not fluent in Spanish. They really wanted us to learn English. because they were taught and forced to believe that assimilation was the only
Meant
way.
giving up,
Yes,
like the part.
was the only way to success in education. And, you know, was very blessed to be a part of an organization in high school and in college that talked often about Latino Latinx issues, assimilation, what it means to have community equity, which then led me down the path of having these conversations more often and thinking about societal design of success, right? And being willing to work out of the box to be successful. Now, I say that and I'm a lawyer now, but but it's interesting because I took that path because I wanted to make a difference, right? I wanted to be a representative for BIPOC communities. And, you know, my family had their fair share of legal issues and had nowhere to turn to, right? For someone who understood them. And just this morning, I was having a conversation with my wife about decolonizing the legal system to make it more accessible and easier and demystifying it because it's created on a very colonized system, right? So that's what led me down the path. But as I continued to grow to where I am now, where I'm creating spaces like Chingona Fest, and I have my business where I create space and encourage BIPOC creatives to have businesses, I'm realizing that my creative design is in creating this space, right? Yeah. And that in itself is creativity, right?
1,000%.
My legal skill is my craft, right? And I use that as a way to create space. And it took me a while to get here. And as I started creating Chingona Fest and having a consultation company, my parents were like, so, but what about that law degree? You know, like, you're still gonna practice law? And I'm like, yes, of course, I'm still gonna practice law, but I don't have to be just a lawyer.
Multifaceted.
Right? I can be multifaceted, and we're human. We're not meant to just be
Monoliths.
exactly. We are diverse, and we represent so much experience, and it's beautiful to see that shine through as a way to challenge the assimilation of success and be successful in a multifaceted way.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I want to work with someone that thinks like you, that's a lawyer, that thinks like you, that
Yeah,
understands
Yeah.
my process and what my needs are, and you can anticipate all these things all at once.
Yeah.
It's necessary to have that, and especially how you said decolonizing, because that is something that, I mean, like, I have been working on it as well, decolonizing my own mindset, because, I mean, those steps that you take to success are a part of colonization, like,
Yes, the whole
journey.
The whole
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
And I mean, this isn't like even design related, but just certain comments and things that like I grew up hearing that people would like compliment on, like, oh yeah, like when I lived in Pakistan, they always be like, oh, you have lighter skin, that's beautiful, but they would never say that about anybody with darker skin. But that is something that is so ingrained in the society. And like, again, that is a construct of design, because that is what was seen as successful.
Right.
Like being the white man was seen as the most success that you could do. So we just could follow that path. But breaking through that is another way of just expanding our own horizons, expanding our viewpoints, and just letting the future generations know that no, what we have is beautiful, and build off of that.
Yeah.
Don't like bury it down just because someone said that this is better.
Yeah. No, and to that point, what do y'all feel is at stake for young people, young creatives, not using their like holistic context to their work? Like bringing that conversation to the work, whatever discipline it is, as a creative, what is at stake?
The truth. Which is like, there's nothing, I mean, the truth is, can be hard, can be difficult, but like I think there's something about, for me personally, I'm in a phase of my life where like all I want to show up as myself whenever I walk into the room.
Yeah.
So that is in my truth.
Yeah.
Good and bad, right? There's a lot of things we all have to work through, but I want to be me. This is me. This is not a gimmick. The hat is not a gimmick. You know what I mean? This is like this is how I show up every day with, you know, in this confidence, and it's bringing all my experiences forward. So it's like you risk the truth when you don't really put yourself into it and go through that endeavor. And there's a difference in how you operate day to day.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Because you at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself.
Yeah.
You go to bed with yourself in your head. It's all in here, everything, mind, body, soul. So that's what's at risk. And there's I'll leave it at that.
No, that's great. Yours is the truth. Love it. What about you?
I think
Denise?
mine would be more fear is one that they that they would struggle with, because that's something that'll be consistently topic no matter what generation you're from, because at least like from my experiences, you always have that want for stability, but when you get that stability, like there isn't necessarily much growth. Like you were talking earlier, like you really have to push those boundaries. So it's going to be that grapple with what path in life do I want to take? Do I want to take the safe run, or do I take the risks? And how to actually make the risks worth it. So I think mine would be fear. I don't know if that would be the right word, but yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Immediately, I started thinking about self-care because as we are having these uncomfortable conversations with people, we are exhausted, right? We feel just, I actually really have a hard time struggling with like, do I call this person out right now? Is it my job to call them out? And I have this internal battle where I'm just like, it's gonna drain me. It's gonna drain me.
I know. When's the next meeting?
What percentage?
But it's only, and I also hate when people come to me sometimes and they're like, but what do I need to do? And I'm almost like,
Even that question puts
Yeah.
the work back on you.
right.
Yeah.
And there's just so much struggle in like, what is the path forward? And so as we're all experiencing life right now in such a time, I think self-care is important. And in speaking your truth, right? You have to realize that if you don't speak your truth and if you're not your authentic self, you also risk your self-care, right? And so I think as we, as creatives and young creatives move forward, just remember to take care of yourself and remember to always ground yourself and know that you're worth it at the end of the day. And your story is unique. No one's you,
Yeah.
ever. And so it's beautiful and it's needed. And never tear down each other. I'm always about community over competition, always.
Yeah.
That's the way forward because that's the way that we get rid of this very competitive, corporate, economic system. We can lift each other up and we can all eat, like
Yeah,
we can all be at the
exactly.
table
Yeah,
together and
absolutely.
eat and succeed and help each other. And that comes in starting with inner work, self-care, and knowing that you're worthy.
Yeah, it's that ego. You gotta push it down.
Kill the ego.
Absolutely.
Kill the ego. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I also struggle with, being a person of color in the spaces that I find myself in is like, how much of this is my will to want to get it done or to see it to fruition, and then how much of it is I need to see it done because my ego will tell me that you never could have done it anyways or it wasn't for you. So I like really find myself questioning that and up against like, Brittany, just let it go. And then I'm like, nope, I'm a dog with a bone. Like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
But I think the older you grow, the whole thing
Yeah.
is a journey. I'll never arrive like
Yeah.
at
Right.
one place. But the older you get, the more you're like, you don't have to clamp so hard on the bone. You like,
Yeah.
your jaw starts to loosen, You like go to the dentist and things.
Stay,
You start to like ease into it.
stay a little flexible.
Right.
Yeah.
I did want to let everyone know we have 15 minutes left, or about 14 minutes left, 16 minutes, that we will be answering questions. So I see y'all are typing. If there's anything that you'd like to ask us individually or something for us to talk about, now's your chance. We'll address them. If not, we'll keep talking as well. But just wanted to let y'all know that y'all had that opportunity to ask this question. Yeah, I know that's interesting. Is there anything like someone that y'all would like to bring to our awareness that's like been getting y'all through this time, or like, oh, that's another designer, or someone that I like, oh, I found out about so-and-so during this time that is like of interest to y'all, or it could be anything, like a cookbook or anything.
There's a lot. That's the thing. There's like so much visual.
I know, all
I'm
we
just
have
like,
is time right now, right? I
Right.
mean, and work.
And-
Both
yeah.
working, but-
This is so cliche, but the person I think about immediately is my wife. She is, we got married October last year, so our entire first year of marriage has been through the pandemic and through all of this uprise, and having a partner who I can have real discussions about racial justice with has been just the best therapy, right? Because we experience life together, and though she's a Black woman and has her own experience, we share in experiences, and she corrects me when I'm wrong, you know, and I think that's the
Healthy.
it's
Yeah.
healthy, it's
Yeah.
necessary. My perspective is not always the right perspective, and we've had lots of discussions about the Latinx community doing better to be a strong advocate for the Black community, and those discussions have led us to be better advocates when we go out into the community and we're talking with friends. But my wife has really just been a stable individual to guide me through my own navigation of what is life right now, right? I think we're all kind of experiencing that. Like, what is our why? What is the purpose? And having this time to be with my wife, and I don't think I'll ever have this much time
Concentrated.
to concentrated at, you know, working at home, is just been such a great reminder that I chose the right person. I know there's a lot of people right now who's like,
It's like a spectrum of
Yeah.
like,
There's a lot of people like,
Yeah.
that's not good.
Whoops.
but I think in the sense that just your friends and your tribe, right? Whether that be
Yeah.
your significant other or, you know, your best friend or your familia, like having your tribe to get you through this is so important, because we need soundboards for our
Yes,
thoughts,
100%.
right?
No
100%.
No, yes.
Yes.
That's the only way we grow, is talking things out.
we do.
Yeah. I guess for me is this pandemic has been like interesting in the sense that for 10 years, like after graduating college up until this past year, I was in this, I don't know, lifestyle, I guess, where me first, like everything was like, I have to do this for myself, to work really hard, be successful. I have to meet these points. I have to meet these goals. And then when we started quarantining, I realized I don't like being alone this long. Like I have no problem. I lived alone for so long, but I need that communication. Like I couldn't go outside and like talk to
Yeah.
my friends and everything. So I decided like my lease was ending. So since I was working remotely, I moved back home. I say back home, but I've actually never lived in this house because my parents still love to move constantly. We're very nomadic. But it was strange for like, you know, I was 18 when I technically left for college and never fully lived at my parents' house until now when I'm 28. And at the beginning it was difficult because I wasn't used to this. I was used to my own freedom and everything. But I started to see my parents as people, which is a weird thing to say, but it's been really refreshing and like having that communication with them, because several times you don't see eye to eye because like even though both of us are immigrants, technically we're different levels. We're generational immigrants. They had different lives. I have different life, and I've become more accustomed to the American way of life than they have, even though like my mother grew up in the West and so she was very used to it. But talking to them, learning about their stories, just like, you know, eating dinner with them every day, cooking with them, and just documenting these memories has been incredible. Like I'm actually grateful that it happened. Yeah. So family and my siblings too. Yeah, shout out to them. It's nice to spend time with them, but now they all left. So
It's all about the parent.
yeah.
What's my answer? Forever seeking.
The truth.
The truth. I mean, as an artist, right? I get so much energy from being around people, but yet I also need to like be alone to do the thing, to do the art and just think and ponder. But I've been thankful that this time has been great. It's like the conversations have been really intentional and meaningful, and for me, it's about listening too. So it's just like listening to like what are the pain points that my friends, my family, what they're going through, how they're seeing the world, which really influences the work that I make, because I'm like, okay, those are interesting data points and talking points. And like I said, on the other side of like trauma and all that stuff, it's like, how do you present hope? And how do you present just like a very light and beautiful moment for them to, whether it's because they're going to look at it on Instagram or in real life, whatever it is, just to like break from the noise of the chaotic, you know, ways of the world right now. So that's been really helpful. And I think this time has also been a time of just, I entered the year with this like kind of mantra of like dream bigger, right? And I was still kind of trying to get a feel for what that meant, and I felt like there were things that were like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a big year, as we all, you know, kind of plan out. But it has been in a lot of ways, and I'm thankful for that, and it's a privilege to say that, but it's like, and I actually want to talk about this because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like everything is really happening for me this year. I was like,
Yeah.
acknowledge that, Don't boast about it, but acknowledge it, celebrate it. But then what are you then doing with that, right? I think a lot of people are kind of struggling with that.
Yeah.
Where they're getting more projects than ever and they're running around like, okay, great. Like, what are you doing with that to create more equitable space
Yeah.
and room?
For it not to be just a season, but like a
Absolutely.
trajectory.
Absolutely. So, so that's been something that's like influenced my thinking and the projects that I'm doing. And it's like, okay, cool. If I'm having moments of victory, how can I like actually redistribute that victory to then be something more communal?
Yeah.
Because I was able to like work with other friends and give people opportunities to work together and level up together. So that's been like a really fun part of this season. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We got 2 questions. I'll keep them anonymous, but I know who you are. Let's see, from the first person, from your perspective, what do you see as positive steps that non-BIPOC individuals can do to help the fight against racism and acceptance?
Dang, that's a really deep first question. I think a good starting point is not always to go to your BIPOC friends for the answers. I think it's important to read books that are, directed at answering these questions by people who study in this field, who are looking at community efforts. And I think that's a good starting point. And then engaging your BIPOC friends on the book, right? Or engaging on efforts that are being done in the community. And investing in BIPOC businesses, nonprofits. And when I'm thinking BIPOC nonprofits, I mean BIPOC-led nonprofits, right? Where their board is diverse.
Looks like the people they're serving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And really be intentional about where you're putting your money, because you vote. I say vote. You vote with your money, right? Like where you want society to go, you vote where you put your money. You vote politics. But yeah, just not always putting it on your BIPOC friends to have the answers. You do that research yourself, and just don't put that heavy weight, because it's exhausting. And some of us will be willing to have that conversation, but like at some point we just get tired.
Don't have it be an expectation.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless you want to answer that.
I was just gonna say that I think going off of that lumping us all together can be dangerous, because like that's where, like, if you want to talk to someone, that's great. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm like, sure, ask me my experience. I'm happy to, I don't know, educate in some way that I can. But my experience is not the same as any other person's.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can't base that off of just me. So it's like, if you want these conversations, have them with many people.
Yeah.
But if you want data, do the research, because there's a lot of scientific data that you can
Right.
do. But
Right.
yeah.
One thing I want to add is call out your non-BIPOC friends. Like, we shouldn't have to be the ones to do that all the time. And, if you see someone saying something that is inappropriate or doing something inappropriate, you can call them out. And that helps remove burden.
All right, let's see, we have 2 more, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up. Let's see, they said, thank you for this forum, exclamation. Being relatively new to Texas, I've been seeking and starved for these conversations and communities. Oh, awesome. I mean, not awesome, but I'm glad that you're getting your hour right now. How are you connecting with other BIPOC designers, creatives, and communities? Maybe, I don't know if that's more like
I guess
how we
How
can
we-
connect with them
Yeah.
as well. It's your
um,
Instagram social.
yeah, social
think-
media is really awesome if you know where to look, I guess. So like Brown State of Mind is one that I love. That's where I started meeting a lot of brown creatives or BIPOC creatives. And then Brown Girls Food Club, plug. So if you're a BIPOC woman or woman identifying, just join us. We have a Slack channel. It's open to all. And also, like, in the design field, ask within your workplace or organizations what they're, so there's like NOMA for architecture, there's Latinos in architecture, there's a lot of women in architecture. So it is doing a little bit of research, but also just like ask your friends or just get online on social media and just like DM someone, be like, hey,
Yeah.
any sessions?
I always suggest researching nonprofits. Social impact is like my jam, right? It's my biggest pillar as an individual. And I think that looking and volunteering with nonprofits that are BIPOC led and serve BIPOC communities is a great way to connect and network with people who care about making an impact. And a lot of times you'll see when you're working with a nonprofits have to put on events, right, to raise money. And so it's a great way to meet a lot of creatives and connect your creative friends to work, right? So that nonprofits can be intentional with who they're hiring to create that space while they raise money. So finding nonprofits.
I know it's kind of difficult in this time, but take up space. Like, go out there and take up space and just be present and allow for the. Definitely, you know, be in the DMs, but like.
Slide.
But I personally love this.
Yes.
Like, this is real,
This is way
right?
better.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't get a sense of who you are by looking at your
Yes.
Instagram feed or whatever. That's
Right.
not a thing. But if we can have a real conversation about like design, style, community, I'm like, wow, I really understand you, and you a lot more better. And it helps me with like the relationships that I want to build,
Yes.
who I want to collaborate with, and you know, and for like you have to like be selective about that, and like who's
Yeah.
ready to actually work and do the work. And so take up space and allow for us to run into each other,
Yeah.
you know, in an organic way.
Yeah.
So
I agree. Do the online work so that you can get to the offline work.
yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
that's where it happens.
Yeah.
That's the
Right.
most important part. Yeah.
Bumper sticker.
But one more time.
Right, yeah.
Ordered,
Online work.
Right, that one.
ordered 5 t-shirts. 1,000.
Is there any last closing? I have my thank yous. We have a couple of minutes for any last closing
No.
statements.
Just thank you to.
Yeah.
That wasn't a.
Yeah, no,
I like
no.
laid that one up.
I took it, don't
Yeah,
worry.
okay.
No, but thank you for creating this space. This is a very meaningful discussion, and it's not too often where we can have discussions like this in a way that is genuine and
Yeah.
authentic. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you
know
for
that
having
time
us.
is most valuable, so thank you for spending your day with us. Thank you guys for attending. We had a blast. I wanted to thank the commune for allowing us to have this talk here. I want to thank y'all for attending, and then also thank my other partners, Brown, LA, Fritzy, Beatty, Yasmin. They're here, you can't see them. 2 of them are here, you can't see them. But thank you guys, and I hope everyone is safe, and keep your mental safe as well.
Sure.
Nice.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Stop, 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 stop.
Oh, there's
Right.
some.
Are we still rolling?
We're still going.
We're still rolling?
We can